Hello and welcome everybody to Protecting Our Planet Day. And this is the first of 4 afternoon sessions when we are exploring how we are protecting our planet through STEM. And this is this is the first one. This is protecting through science. Now, a very warm welcome back to those of you who might have been taking part in POP22 this morning. If you're joining us for the first time, a particularly warm welcome. Now, we've got about half an hour, 35 minutes in this session. And what are we going to be doing today? Well, essentially, what hopefully you're going to get out of today is that we're going to be talking to 3 very inspirational scientists who you can see on the screen. I'm going to introduce them to you in a moment. And we're going to be hearing all about their green career adventures that they have been doing since studying STEM subjects. So if you're sitting there watching and thinking about STEM subjects, we're going to hear from them how that could take you into these incredible science green careers that could help us protect our planet in the future. Now, my name's Hermione Cockburn. I'm your patron. I'm very excited to be here. It's a shame I can't see any of you, but I can see our wonderful contributors. My name's Hermione. I'm your patron, which means that I get to introduce our panelists for today. And over here on a second screen, I can see your questions as they come in. So my request to all of you sitting out there is to make sure you keep your questions coming. And I'm going to be picking out some of those questions and asking our panelists what you want to hear from them at the end. I've got lots of questions, but it actually doesn't matter what I think. It's what you are going to want to get out of and know from our panelists that matters. So make sure you get your questions into the Q&A. So before I introduce everyone, we can just have a bit of a wave. You can see hopefully that we're joined by Alice Lake. Hello. Jenifer Weeks, hi Jenny, and Jack Leland as well up there. Jack, hello, hi. So I'm going to introduce them to you in a moment. First of all, I just want to say a minute about why I'm here. I am a scientist by training, in that when I was in your shoes, I was really interested in geography. I studied geography. I went on and I did a PhD, that's a research degree, looking at surface processes and geomorphology. I was a real physical geographer as a young person. And then I decided that I wanted to help people understand more about science. And I went from working in science to working in science communication. And my current job is here. I'm here in Edinburgh at a science centre called Dynamic Earth. And Dynamic Earth, I have a brilliant job. I run a visitor centre, essentially, a science centre where people from all backgrounds and all ages can come and find out about the planet. And a lot of my job is about kind of helping the public, young and old, find out about science. And that's why I was so thankful to the organisers of today for asking me to come and be your patron, because if there's anything that I can do to help young people really see what science is like and see what it can offer them, then I'm here with bells and whistles on. So that's me, and that's probably enough from me for now. The first thing I'm going to do now is introduce Alice. Alice is going to talk for 5 or 6 minutes about her job and about her career. We're then going to hand over to the other speakers, and after that, it's question time. So Alice Lake. Now, Alice, am I right in saying you are a foundation scientist in the post-processing applications team at the Met Office? We can see
yes,
there the Met Office, yeah. But you know, it's very easy to just think of the Met Office as weather forecasting, but I think there's much more to the Met Office than that, and hopefully that's something you're going to be sharing with us now.
Yes, we do a whole lot of things that aren't just weather forecasting, and hopefully Jenny and I will be able to give you some kind of like insight into a few of those. So okay. I'm just going to share my slides.
If you want to share your screen, I'll go on mute and then we can hear from you. We can see your slides. That's lovely.
Brilliant. Thank you.
To you, Alice.
So yeah, hello everyone. My name is Alice, and like Hermione said, I work at the Met Office as a scientist. But before I talk to you about what I do at the Met Office, I thought I'd first talk about my journey into science and how I got to where I am today. So here's me at the start of my journey back in 1997. And also I've got a couple of the first big milestones in my life, which was starting primary school and then starting secondary school. So, throughout my childhood, I actually did not dream of growing up to become a scientist. I spent most of my free time reading or running around outside or making a huge mess with arts and crafts supplies. Yeah, I loved music, I loved dance, I loved theatre, basically all kinds of art. And most of all, I loved ballet. So if you ask me what my dream job was, right up to the age of probably 16 or 17, to be honest, I would have told you ballet dancer. So I actually, yeah, I did a lot of ballet and I took it very seriously. So you might be wondering, how did I go from that to ending up as a scientist? So when I was 16 at school, we did the UKMT Maths Challenge, which hopefully some of you will have heard of. But if you've not heard of it, it's basically some kind of like puzzle problem solving test that children and teenagers in the UK can sit for fun every year. And anyway, I absolutely loved it. I remember thinking, like, this doesn't feel like maths. It's basically just fun puzzle and problem solving. Yeah, it was really fun. And from doing that, I was lucky enough to go on some summer schools and I did some things called Maths Olympiads, which are kind of like tests with some really fun kind of puzzles that you can use maths to solve, and had a great time. So then I thought, great, you know what? Let's look at doing maths at university. So when I got to sixth form, I chose to study maths, further maths, and physics because those seemed like a good combination. Because, like I said, I was thinking about doing maths at university. But then in the summer holidays between year 12 and year 13, I was hanging around in a charity bookshop in my hometown of Stratford-on-Avon, was waiting to get a bus home. And I spotted this really cool book on the shelf, which had a really cool cover. It was kind of like blue and purple with all these stars all over it. It was only a couple of pounds, so I bought it to kind of keep me occupied. And I read it on the bus home, and I kept reading it when I got home, and I kept reading it the next day, and I was absolutely hooked. And it was actually a book about quantum physics, which is the kind of science of the really small. So if you look at physics on a really small scale, particles do all these kind of weird and wonderful things. And this was, it was so interesting to me, and I thought, I can't study maths at university. I've got to study physics instead. So yeah, I went on and I spent a very wonderful 3 years at Lancaster University in the Northwest, studying for a degree in theoretical physics. And theoretical physics is basically kind of mathsy physics. So how can we use maths to describe the world around us? And I enjoyed it so much that when I'd finished that, I then went on and did an extra year at Oxford to get my master's degree also in theoretical physics. But at this point, I was kind of in a bit of a dilemma because I found that the more interesting the maths was getting, the kind of more abstract the concepts felt. Um, so I decided that I wanted to stay in science, but I wanted to do something that felt a bit more real. So I searched around for a job that would let me stay in science, but to use my skills, so things like my coding skills and my mathematical skills, to do something that felt real and that felt useful. And that's how I ended up at the Met Office, which is where I am today. So, like Hermione said, the team I work in is called Post Processing Applications. And what we do is we take information about the weather forecast and we turn that into useful information that members of the public and customers can use to make decisions. So, I've got two bits of examples of some work that I'm involved in up here. So, if you look in the top right, that first bit of work is developing the next generation of road and rail forecasting. So that's developing a physics-based model that can tell us things like, is the road going to be icy? Like, do we need to go out and grit? Are the rail heads going to be really hot? Do we need to watch out for rail buckling? Another bit of work I do, which is in the top left, is working with the South African Weather Service to help them forecast renewable energy production. So that's things like if we know what the weather is going to be like, then how much energy are our wind turbines or our solar panels going to generate? And there's a lot of other fun stuff I get to do as part of my job too. So these photos I've got in the bottom left-hand corner, the photo where there's a group of us kind of sat on a rock is from when a group of us went up to Manchester this summer for the Royal Meteorological Society Early Career Scientist Conference, which is a really fun trip. So we got to go up to Manchester and we got to share the kind of things that we've been working on. And then the other photo in the bottom left corner was when I and a group of other people, the others of us sat around the desk, organised a conference for people in the Met Office. So that was a couple of days where we all kind of got together and we shared our work and we ate cake, which was really good fun. So yeah, hopefully that gives you a little bit of an insight into my journey into science. And I'm now going to hand over to Jenny, I think, who also works in the Met Office as a scientist, but does actually a pretty different job to me.
Thanks, Alice. Yes, we're going to hand over into Jenny for a moment. I thought that was really fascinating. And I shared your love of dance and drama, particularly when I was when I was growing up. And it's kind of interesting that, you can have that real passion for something that's completely different from perhaps what we might traditionally think of, if you're going to study maths and theoretical physics. But that was really lovely to share. Thank you so much for that. I'm keeping an eye on the Q&A. Yes, our moderator has said, please post questions for our panelists in the Q&A. I'm bursting with questions already, but let's hope that people watching near want to know things from on the back of that talk. That would be wonderful. Keep posting them. So now we're going to hand over and hear from Jenny. Now, Jenny, as we know, you're at the Met Office as well, but something quite different. You are a climate scientist and you work in international climate services at the Met Office. So I'm going to hand over to you. Tell us what that means and how you ended up there.
Great, thank you. So I'm just going to share my window. So hopefully you can see the slides.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay,
Okay,
great. I'm going to begin then. So hello, my name is Jenny Weeks, and as Hermione said, I work as a climate scientist at the Met Office. So what I do in my role is I work with people across the world, and I use science to help them tackle climate change. So in particular, I look at how sea levels are changing across the world, and I provide people with the information they need to help them plan and respond to sea level rise. So I'm just going to go briefly through my career journey and how I got to where I am today. So my journey started at school, and afterwards I studied a 4-year university degree to achieve a bachelor's and a master's in earth sciences. And then after that, I took a year out to do something completely different, and I worked for a winter season in Canada. And this gave me a break from exams and also a chance to think about my career. And so when I got back to the UK, I applied and got a job as a climate scientist at the Met Office, and that's where I've been now for the last 3 years. So for my school journey, let's start with my hobbies. So as Alice was saying, she kind of had this idea she might want to be a dancer, but I actually didn't really know what I wanted to be at all. I hadn't really kind of got a set career plan kind of at any stage really. But outside of class, I enjoyed a lot of sport, which included hiking and being outside or playing tennis and swimming. And I also took part in a lot of music clubs. I played the clarinet, and I enjoyed sketching and painting as well. So throughout school, I followed the path of choosing subjects that I enjoyed the most, because if you're enjoying what you're doing, it makes studying a lot easier. So in general, I enjoyed the subjects with numbers or practical subjects. I enjoyed them more compared to kind of writing essays or more language subjects. So science, maths, English, they're mandatory at GCSE. And for my school, a language was too. But for my options at GCSE, I chose to do geography, music and art as subjects, which aligned really well with my hobbies. And so at A-level, you need like a minimum of 3 subjects to apply to most universities. I had a hard decision to make at one point between art and chemistry, but I knew that I'd always continue with art outside of school, whereas I knew I probably wouldn't study chemistry in my own time. So at A-level, I chose to do maths, physics and chemistry, as well as music to AS, which actually really kind of complemented those sciencey subjects really well. So in my degree, I chose to do earth sciences. Not just because you get to call yourself master of the earth afterwards, but because it combined the maths and the physics that I enjoyed, as well as my love of the natural world. And I used to absolutely love going to the Natural History Museum in London. So I got to learn about the history of the Earth and the solar system, as well as volcanoes, earthquakes, and also be outdoors and go on field trips. So for example, I spent 6 weeks in Switzerland mapping the rock formations in that area. And this is a picture of a couple of the many, many cows that we saw in the mountains. I also felt like I wanted to do something that would make a real positive difference to the world. And so I was able to choose modules later on climate and oceanography, which were kind of leading quite well to my work. So what do I do now? So I work as a climate scientist in international climate services. So I look at kind of, well, climate science involves looking at weather conditions averaged over long time periods and looking at how those conditions are going to change as our planet warms. So in my team, we work with people across the world to find out what climate information would be useful to help them tackle climate change and to help them make important decisions. So this makes sure that the science research that we're doing can actually be used to help people and help them make decisions. So in my work, this involves using our computer models and science knowledge to study how the average surface of the sea will change over the next 100 years and beyond. And the data that we produce might be helpful for people building sea defences or planning for flooding and erosion along the coast. So I then communicate the information to a range of people, including coastal engineers, coastal protection agencies, and policymakers. And that involves running webinars and training workshops. So you can see a screenshot here from a virtual webinar that we ran for people in Pakistan. And I also communicate my research to other scientists at conferences and learn from other scientists as well by attending training workshops myself. So for example, this summer, I went to the Netherlands and learned about how they're protecting their country from sea level rise. So it's really about working with scientists and organizations and communities across the world so that we can learn from each other and so that we can tackle climate change together. And a lot of the data that we produce is stored in an archive hosted by the Centre for Environmental Data Analysis, which I think Jack will talk more about. So I'll pass over.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Jenny. Another really interesting sort of career journey. We've got some questions coming in here. One of our first questions, it's talking about the influence of ice melting on sea level change. So perhaps that's something that we'll pick up at the end. You know, you're working with this Earth system. We hear about, you know, the impact of climate change and obviously a very strong connection between melting ice and sea level change and how that's going to impact people's decisions in the future. So we'll come back to you on that one if that's okay. But you talked then about lots of data, and the next person we're going to hear from and their career path, their green career adventure, is Jack Leland. And Jack, on my screen, I'm seeing that you've got lots of initials after your name, STFC, UKRI. Now, I know these are government organizations, but actually you are a software engineer at another government organization called the Centre for Environmental Data Analysis, that we sometimes call CEDA. So you might want to unpick some of those acronyms very, very quickly, but it would be lovely to now hear your career journey. So over to you, Jack.
Thank you. I will just share my screen. Lovely.
That's great. We can see that.
Excellent. Lovely. Yeah. So as Hermione was saying, I have a lot of acronyms associated with me. I've got an array of them along the bottom of my screen here. But I am a software developer principally at the Centre for Environmental Data Analysis. I will get on to explaining kind of what that means, like how software development and data analysis and the climate all kind of come together. But I first kind of wanted to introduce myself by talking about my pathway through to science, because I haven't always been a software engineer. There was a point where I was a PhD student and actually studying science, which was always good fun. But I started in school, as we all do, as you all are, studying a variety of subjects I'll get onto in a second. But as others said, I didn't really know what I wanted to do at that point. And it's quite a crucial decision that you don't really get a whole lot of help with in your life. So I did the best I could with the information available to me at the time. I chose to study physics at university. And this is one pathway through to science. There are many others. I know a few people who started doing apprenticeships and then came through it that way. But I chose to go to university and study physics. I did this because it kind of kept my options open. And because physics is primarily about problem solving at its core. And problem solving is used by everyone, everywhere. So if you want to get a career anywhere, then being good at problem solving is a good set of skills to have. But it was at university that I kind of fell in love with physics, and also discovered fusion, which is what I ended up studying my PhD in, which is a novel energy generation technique. It's an alternate form of nuclear energy where we join things together as opposed to break them apart. I'll get onto that in a second as well. But before I studied that, I kind of decided to do something else for a bit, just to be a real human adult for a while, and did do some software engineering in London for a couple of years and use that to fund some traveling, because there is more to life than science, as much as I'm going to mention science in this presentation. And then studied my PhD, earned my PhD, and decided that actually what I really enjoyed doing throughout that process was making software tools for scientists to use. And that's kind of led me to where I am today. So I promised I'd talk about school subjects. Here they are. For my GCSEs, it was all the ones they forced you to take, i.e. maths, English, lit and language. I also did statistics because I really, really enjoyed using numbers, as others have said. But also loved studying history and writing stories and all of those things. So I studied history, studied Spanish and music. Music was a big part of my life and still remains to this day. Also studied business economics, but that was primarily for the school trip to Thorpe Park. I can't really say that was a huge interest of mine. But I went on to study maths and physics and further maths at A-levels. And I threw computing in there because I'm a big lover of video games, and thought, you know, I could learn to make some of these. I don't know what I want to do. Maybe that'd be good. But it was at A-levels. I had a particularly good teacher who really got me enthused about physics. And then I went on to study, as I said, an integrated master's in physics at UCL. But as I say, that science isn't everything in my life. I'm also a keen hiker and cyclist. I love music, like listening to, going to gigs, playing in bands terribly. It's great. And as I say, video and board games, big part of my life as well. So I wanted to give a brief day in the life of what it's like to be a scientist. And there's a kind of dichotomy here where there's the dream that you'll be in the lab doing things with pipettes every day. And that's true for a lot of scientists. Like my partner, for example, is a biologist who spends a lot of time in the lab with those gloves on and with those giant pipettes, as you can see. But for my case, the reality was more closely sitting at a computer doing data analysis. Not all the time. There were some very exciting bits in labs, and I'll talk about that now. In my PhD, I studied fusion, as I said. And fusion is basically has the goal of trying to make a sun on Earth in a big magnetic bottle. So you can see on the right here, that is one of the devices we call a tokamak, which is a big magnetic bottle that we try and keep a very, very hot gas in. This gas can go up to like 100 million degrees C, which is pretty hot. And as part of my PhD, I was allowed to poke bits of graphite into it. You can see in the bottom left here, this is the bit of graphite that I was poking into the very, very hot gas, which is the big blue line. Basically a lightsaber, I think is the closest thing we have to a lightsaber in the world. I think I can confidently say that. But yeah, what I wanted to highlight here basically was that my PhD gave me lots of opportunity to travel. Not only to perform the research, because I performed this research in the Netherlands, you can see from the little picture of a bike down here next to a canal, but also to travel and tell people about the research that I was doing. So I ended up going to a few conferences, actually, one in York, one in New York as well. But that led me to what I do now. And as I said, I wanted to make software tools for other scientists to use, because that's what I enjoyed the most. And so I became a software developer at the Center for Environmental Data Analysis, CEDA, which basically looks after climate scientist data on a supercomputer. A supercomputer is just a big collection of computers all wired together. But we have a lot of data. And I say 14 petabytes here, but that's kind of difficult to imagine. So a colleague of mine did a calculation recently, and it's 10 full Minecraft worlds full of data. So if you explored an entire Minecraft world, which is like 7 times the size of the surface of the Earth or something like that, and then you stored that and you did that 10 times, that's how much data we hold. And with that much data comes a big problem with figuring out how to store it. And actually what we do is use old school magnetic tape, like you get in old school cassettes and stuff like that, because it's just the cheapest way of doing that much storage. But to do that, we have to make little tape robots run around. So you can see a little picture down here of our tape robot. Not entirely clear what the robot does, but it runs back and forth, grabbing little cassettes and putting them into our cassette player for us, which is great fun. So yeah, that's all I've got to say. Thank you very much for listening. I look forward to your questions.
Wow, thanks, Jack. I love the idea of the tape robot.
Mm.
So what's interesting is that robot must need someone to look after it. So there's robotics just there in that data storage system, which is interesting to think about. Okay, now thank you all three. I'm really inspired. I kind of wish I could go back and start again and end up in some of these amazing jobs that you've got and those career paths that you've followed. I'm keeping an eye on the Q&A. Keep your questions coming in, everybody. I think I'm going to take that first one Now, this is from, okay, so we've got about 5 minutes. We're going to go through these quite quickly. This is from Rivers. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your school name wrong, but this is basically what will happen if all the ice melts. Now, there's lots to that question. You know, will all the ice melt? And yeah, what's the link between ice melting, sea level? What are the projections? What are we looking at, Jenny, with sea level rise?
Okay, yeah, I'll just quickly go through what causes sea level rise. So sea level rise is caused by kind of, or at least global sea level rise, kind of two main contributors. So that's as the planet's warming, the ocean, as it warms, it expands, and that just causes the sea level to rise, because if it's getting bigger, it kind of just rises. And then also the melting of land ice. So land ice in being kind of glaciers, and also the ice sheets that we see on the north and south poles. So if they melt, just the kind of the sheer input of water into the oceans kind of causes that to increase. There's some kind of aspects of, you know, how the ice sheets behave that we kind of know quite well, and there's others we don't. So in particular, what we don't know is kind of whether it might get to a stage where there's kind of this runaway acceleration of the ice sheets, in particular the West Antarctic ice sheet. So that's something that's quite hard to model. But yeah, hopefully that gives a bit of a brief answer.
Yeah, I think it does. I think we're going to race through a few more questions, but thank you.
Yeah.
Keep them coming. This one is directed, this is anonymous, but it's directed to Jenny and Alice, and it's really about working at the Met Office. You know, this big government organization, you've got great jobs in it. What is it that you like about working at the Met Office? It certainly comes across that you both have such enthusiasm for your roles there. What do you like about it? Tell us a bit about your colleagues as well. What's it like?
Yeah, I can take that one, Jenny, if you want. So I know one of the things that I really enjoy working at the Met Office is there's this huge range of science. So I think Jenny and I have tried to get it across, but it's not just the weather forecast. There's a whole range of really cool things like space weather forecasting. And I heard of someone that was doing like forecasting of locust movement, because apparently that's related to weather patterns. And there's just so much stuff going on. So I feel like anytime I talk to someone about what they do in their role, it always blows my mind. So I think that's really cool. Yeah, it's definitely a really cool place to be.
Yeah. Now, Jack, I've got quite a specific one coming in for you here, which I think has been triggered by your description of fusion. How do you contain, this is from Crispin School, hello Crispin School, this is how do you contain all of the hot gas in the reactor? So just remind us what's going on there, and yeah, how is it contained?
So we use big magnets basically. So you can, if you pass a current through a bit of wire, you can generate a big magnetic field. If you do that with a big enough wire, you can make a very, very strong magnetic field. And because when you heat up a gas that much, it becomes charged, the charge then is able to interact properly with the magnetic field and stay in a single place. So basically, we just have giant magnets around that picture that I showed you, that we run a big current through.
Okay, that's a good answer. Thank you very much. We've got a question coming in. This is from Madeley School, and they're asking you, I think all three of you perhaps quickly go around the table, what are the most exciting projects that you're working on? So you've given us quite a big description of things, but if there was one sort of element of your roles that you could think of, what would you say? Number one, like, oh, this is the exciting bit of my job at the moment. I don't know who's got that on the tip of their tongue. Jenny?
I can go. Yeah. Yes. So as I was kind of saying in my presentation, what we do is we project how sea level will change, and we kind of we have that data. And so what is really great is kind of working with people in different countries. And at the moment, I'm planning on going to be a visiting scientist in Singapore, where they're looking at creating kind of sea level storylines. So different kind of storylines for how sea level rise kind of could pan out, and what people can do to help plan. So actually being able to speak to people in different organizations and helping them plan, and kind of actually kind of speaking to people, being able to help them plan, and trying to kind of make that difference is something that's really enjoyable.
I think that's really like sort of, there's a bit of analogy in there. You're studying the Earth system. You know, it's this very holistic, big Earth system. We're all really connected within that one system, living as we all are on this one planet. And it's wonderful to think that your expertise that you're developing here, you live in the UK, you've done your science here in the UK, but actually it's that international perspective that you get, and working with people abroad. I think that's really, really interesting. Alice, what's top of your sort of exciting projects list?
Going to say it's a bit of a different answer to Jenny, but I know in general the thing that I find most exciting at work is I really enjoy the problem solving. So there's a lot of kind of fun coding and kind of like feels like solving loads of puzzles. Yeah.
Now we've got 1 minute left. So Jack, I'm going to hand over to you. Is it problem solving? What is it? Is it the tape robot? What's the most exciting thing in your job?
Well, I think the most exciting thing in my job is just work. Well, it's A, playing with lots of fun software tools, and B, it's then telling other people about those fun software tools you've been playing with and seeing them get excited about it as well. I think that's what is most exciting for me.
Fantastic. Well, listen, guys, I've been told 1 minute, so it is time to wrap up this session, but it's been an absolute pleasure for me to meet Jack, Jenny and Alice. I hope it has been for you as well. I hope they've inspired you to consider sticking with those STEM subjects, sticking with science, and see where it can take you. It's absolutely fantastic. The next session that is about to start soon, it's called Protecting Through Technology. So for those of you at school, you know, stay where you are. That session is going to start shortly. So all that I've got to do now is say thank you very much and goodbye. Thank you, panelists. Goodbye, everybody.